but Renee has lost almost 50 pounds at the same time.
Henry Foots was a fan favorite on My 600 Lab Life. He was one of the first and most successful patients that Dr. Now worked with, but then he tragically and mysteriously passed away pretty soon after his episode aired. But what happened to him? He seemed to be doing so well, so what led to him losing his life? Henry's story is truly devastating. When he was on the show, people couldn't help but root for him. He seemed like such a nice, gentle person, and it was clear that he was incredibly serious about his health journey. I think we all genuinely thought that he had a bright future ahead of him, but sadly that wasn't the case. Henry's episode aired in February 2012. Everyone quickly fell in love with him, but then just a couple of months later, in November 2012, something terrible happened in Henry's life. He was involved in an awful accident that resulted in a lot of pain and hurt. At the time, Henry worked as a bus driver, and one day he was driving a shuttle bus in Houston, Texas. He probably thought this would be just another regular day at work, but then everything went wrong really fast. Henry had a sudden medical episode. It's not clear what exactly happened to him, but whatever it was that came over him caused him to lose control of the bus. Unfortunately, this led to something horrible. The bus Henry was driving hit a pedestrian. The woman was just walking on the street when it happened. Sadly, she didn't make it. She lost her life, but there's more. 11 other passengers who were on the bus were also injured. Luckily, they all survived the accident, as did Henry. But what happened that day was still devastating. It wasn't really Henry's fault. He probably couldn't have known that he was going to have a sudden medical emergency, and he wasn't charged for causing the accident or anything like that either, but it still must have felt awful. He actually admitted that he had a lot of guilt about what happened. He even said that he would trade places with a pedestrian if he could. So you can see that this really affected him. Henry was always such a caring, loving person. He never intended for anything like this to happen, so I'm not surprised that he was so devastated by it. Sadly, there was more tragedy to come. The accident happened in November 2012, and then just a couple of months later, in May 2013, something else happened. Henry passed away that month. He was only 54 years old at the time, which is one of the many reasons why his passing was so devastating. It had only been a year since he appeared on the show. He finally got his life on track and was taking care of his health, but then he had that tragic accident, and then just about 6 months later he passed away. His family never revealed what happened. We don't know what the cause of his passing actually was. It could be that he sustained a serious injury in the accident that caught up with him in the end, or maybe whatever medical episode he had while driving happened again, but this time it took his life. It's also possible that his passing could have been related to his weight loss, but this is all just speculation. The truth is that we don't know what happened to Henry. His family chose to keep it private, and we should respect that. Whatever the cause of his passing was, I just hope that it was peaceful. Henry had been through so much in his life. He deserved a peaceful passing. Henry grew up in Texas, and from a young age, he struggled with his relationship with food. He developed a food addiction pretty early on, and sadly, this dependence continued to get worse for years. Henry didn't really care about what was happening to his body when he was younger. He ignored all the warning signs. He would sneak food into the house and then eat it in the bathroom. His mom, Addie, apparently knew about this. She was worried about her son, but she didn't know how to help him. She blamed herself, but she also described Henry as stubborn. It really sounds like he didn't want his parents' help. Even his dad couldn't do anything about Henry's food addiction, so his problem just continued to get worse, and eventually, even Henry couldn't ignore the reality of his situation anymore. For the longest time, he didn't really care about what was happening, but then one day he realized that things had gone too far. Henry suffered from many different health problems. He had diabetes, sleep apnea, lymphedema, and high blood pressure. He couldn't really do anything on his own. He was dependent on those around him, especially his family. I'm sure they were happy to help him and be there for him, but that doesn't mean that there weren't any problems with this. Henry had to use a wheelchair, and at his heaviest, he could barely fit in a car. All of this had a big impact on his mental health. He became depressed and started experiencing feelings of hopelessness. He also felt really isolated despite the fact that he had family around him, but at that point, they were his carers more than they were his equals, which must have contributed to those feelings of loneliness. Henry also lost his relationship at one point. At the time of his passing, he was actually married to a woman named Lycurgus Kirk Walker, but he and Kirk had a pretty complicated romantic history. They lived together for 13 years, and she was there for him and cared for him when he was struggling with his weight. But at one point, it all became too much for Kirk, and the couple split up. This was because she felt like she was more of a nurse than than Henry's partner. This must have been heartbreaking for Henry, but he never gave up. He loved Kirk, and he hoped that they'd be able to reunite one day. And they did. They got back together sometime later, and they even tied the knot in the summer of 2011. Sadly, they only had 2 years of marriage before Henry passed away, but it's clear that they loved each other, and I'm sure that they were both grateful for the time that they got to spend together. It's clear that Henry's life was full of heartbreak. On top of everything else I already mentioned, he also lost his father to cancer. This happened while he was still on his weight loss journey, which must have made things even more difficult for him. I mean, imagine keeping to a strict workout schedule and maintaining discipline while grieving your parent. The fact that Henry was able to stay strong is incredible. He never gave up, and that's why so many people just fall in love with him. Henry weighed about 715 pounds when he joined the show. What's interesting is that the first season of My 600-Pound Life was actually filmed over 7 years. We got to see Henry's journey from 2004 to 2011, and this only highlighted his amazing transformation. He was 47 years old at the start of filming, and by the time he was 54, he looked completely different. He went from 715 pounds to about 275 pounds. That's a pretty crazy transformation, and it wasn't without its complications. Henry even flatlined during one of the surgeries he had. He admitted that he thought he'd passed away, but luckily he made it through the surgery and he got to live a little longer, although not as long as we'd all hoped. Henry's story is both inspiring and devastating. He achieved so much in such a short amount of time. It's sad that he passed away so soon, especially after going through something as traumatic as that bus accident. It's been 10 years since his passing, but that doesn't make what happened any less tragic. Anyway, what do you guys think? Were you a fan of Henry? Do you agree that his transformation was genuinely impressive? Let me know in the comments below.